Hey, I just gotta say, I for some reason, just right before I start these, man, I just get nervous. I'm excited about it all the way up until 3 minutes till, and then all of a sudden, reality sets in. And it's like I just feel like I'm throwing myself off a cliff and hoping God catches me. Something that really God's been working on getting across to me lately is a separation from religion. I think I mentioned it before. He's starting to lift up off of religion. I remember when I was still living in Washington, 10 years ago, somewhere around there. There was this little coffee shop there, and I would just go and sit and write. I'd just start with my thoughts, and sometimes God would jump in with His, and sometimes it would just be me. There was one time, man, I was in it, and He just showed me something. Stuff like that didn't happen to me very often then, but it's like I saw this really short snippet of an animation, a principle being applied in motion, something like that. And it was about how the light is going to get lighter and the dark is going to get darker until there's no more gray. And then I moved down here, and then I hear Dave Roberson say something like the faster going to go faster and the slower going to go slower, something like that. Gave myself quite the pat on the back for that one. It's like, hey, I can hear God. And I always held that one dear to me because I was really hoping that was God. And then I moved down here where I didn't know anybody and heard the same thing. I thought that was pretty cool. And just lately, man, just for, I guess, the last month and a half or so, He's just been dumping things on me. And it started with Him dumping on me, and then I would just kind of start drowning in everything He was showing me. So I just dive into the Bible. Man, I got, where I work, I get 3 or 4 hours at a time where I can just put headphones on and let Johnny Cash lull me into a routine with reading the Bible. And I did a play count on iTunes, and so far I've listened to 2 Corinthians like 40 times, not to mention how many times I've read it. It's just been over and over, and it's like I'll be listening to it and I can just quote right along with it almost the entire thing, but it's like there's something new every single time. I pull something out of it. And same with 1 John. I've been listening to that one a lot too. But just the way I've been immersing myself in God, He's been able to get more and more and more and more across to me. And it almost feels like I've been getting these spiritual promotions left and right. Just because I've been so much more proactive than I was before. And one of the biggest things that I'm still working on, that He told me a few weeks ago, was that He's lifting up off of religion. This cloud of grace that's been in churches is going to start going away. People that play religion are going to start being exposed for what they really are. Just because there is enough knowledge enough people applying that knowledge in their lives and having their own individual walk with God that he can start using them the way he's been wanting to use every single church so far. But so many churches are stubborn with their bulletins and their schedules and their routines. They forget to have God involved in their church. You know, it's from what God's shown me about it, it's just not going to be pretty. But that is not what I want to talk about. That is just a good segue or a springboard into it, if it's even that. But last week, I think it was, I was just going through all these old conversations with God, just reading them and sharing them on a very specific basis. Some people don't need to know that much about me. Some people don't want to. Anyway, I was just reading them and just thinking about where I have come from, how far God's brought me, just because I let him, how much hope I put in him to allow him to flesh out that hope with faith. I used to think that, man, how cool would it be if I could be one of those kind of Christians that knows God well enough to just inspire people, to be the kind of Christian that people come to when they need a fire lit under their backside. You know, I mean, obviously there's a bigger scale for it, but to an extent, that's where I've come. And I love it. And just reading through 2 Corinthians and listening to it and just drowning in it and getting so much more of a personal look at Paul, and then having a familiarity, a knowledge, enough of a knowledge of Acts and of his other epistles to know he spent some time with God. And yeah, we can all agree about that. But he talks about how he was one born out of due season. And just today or yesterday, I started, when God was showing me all these principles, how God was preparing Paul for his ministry. When he went out in the desert, when he was almost avoiding all these reputable church people, he was just, man, it was him and God. And in a roundabout way, he says that I didn't receive these revelations from man. I got them straight from Jesus. And man, there's so much I just want to get into. So we'll start with a little bit of foreshadow. Don't entertain discouraging thoughts just because what God is showing you, where he wants to take you, isn't where you're at right now. And that like it doesn't even really seem feasible right now. Don't look at what's around you. Don't look at what's inside of you other than that vision that God's given you, that he wants you to become, that he's trying to help you get to. Man, when I first got filled with the Spirit, I knew I wanted to do something for God, but I didn't know where to start. Man, I just wanted to be as greedy about God as I could be, man. I wanted as much of him as I could handle. So I just kept uh, putting myself in positions to empty myself to be able to handle more of him. And man, I was seeing stuff years ago, stuff that God was wanting me to do, and I would take this this emotional, intellectual, mental inventory of myself at the time and see how short I was coming up. And I was like, man, there ain't no way this is going to happen, but this is what's inside of me, and I got to go with it. I can't ignore it because I've seen what happens to other people when they ignore it, and they're miserable. I can't do that with my life. I got to do something, man. It's God or bust. So, with that desperate, almost empty hope, God kept coming through for me and kept coming through for me. Eventually built me up to the point where I knew it was him that was asking me to move down here, halfway across the country, away from just about everybody. Knowing that he had something for me down here, not having any idea what. Come down here, man, I'm like a googly-eyed 3-year-old just staring at everything. All this revelation from the church, man, I was trying to bite off so much more than I could chew, and I was stepping way further out ahead of where I was. And there was a lot of good stuff that happened then. A friend of mine that I knew up in Washington got healed of fibromyalgia, but I was too stupid to train and to build, impart, yeah, to impart the knowledge and spiritual standing for my friend to be able to retain what God did for her. Things fell through, man, and last I heard it was way, way worse than when I had talked to her. And she was basking in it. This is my lot in life. God has done this to teach me a lesson. Phooey. Anyway. Because, you know, I mean, that was stuff that I knew God was wanting to use me in. It's just stuff that people can't do by themselves. Like healings, like miracles. Stuff that you just can't deny is something above and outside and beyond human capability. So at the time I was stepping out with head knowledge more than spiritual development, just because I knew that's where I was going to end up, was that kind of ministry of being a conduit for God that just does things that are undeniably supernatural. Not the crap about gold dust or sticking quarters on walls. Stuff that actually glorifies God, because that's what God cares about. You know, I just kept trying and trying and trying. And good things happened, man, you know. But it was like I was getting halfway there because I didn't have the maturity or the spiritual development really to follow through. So God tried to work with me where I was at, and man, I learned a lot then, and burned myself a lot too. But then I was just trying to reconcile how I'm behind point A. I'm in point -3 is where I felt like I was. And God wants me to get to point B. I don't even know how. So I just, man, when I first moved down here, there was a lot of situations that tried to keep me from growing that tried to scare me off. It's like intimidation factors, you know, just not physical bullying, but mental, emotional kind of bullying, just to try and dissuade me. But I made a decision when I moved away from all my family. I ain't giving up. And, you know, wouldn't you know it, I may have given up for a month or two here and there, and there, and there, and there, and there. But I made sure my heart stayed in the right place, because I didn't sacrifice family, lifelong friends just to move down here and wuss out. So there's all these situations, man. I just, at the time, I didn't know anything to do but just pray in tongues and go to church, man. I just give myself to God the best I knew how. And through that, God kept building things and building things. And now I look back, man. How did I get here? But God wasn't preparing me for what I could see at the time. God was preparing me. Every time I wanted to give up, just throw in the towel, go back up, hang out with family, and live a normal, miserable life, wondering what I could have done. God just told me, you were born for this time. Still gets me. God has been building me up in anticipation of what's coming, of Him lifting up off of religion, of church-wide accountability. Not churches in the four walls, church as in individuals that are all connected to Jesus, to maintain a sense of purity within the church. You read Paul's epistles, man. He's he goes to these places and establishes a church. He builds a spiritual foundation for these people and gets them to the point where they should be autonomous. And then all these people come behind him and take credit for what he did, and they diminish Paul's authority and the respect Paul deserved by getting these churches to focus on tangible things, more or less, and attacking Paul's weakness. For his letters, they say, are weighty and powerful, but his bodily presence is weak and his speech is contemptible. Man, I didn't break Paul's spirit, man. I just fired him up. But when Paul was in the desert getting ministered to by God, he was getting ministered to in anticipation of these things happening, them coming to pass. Like even when Paul kept Peter accountable, when Peter would hear about Jews coming and then he just quit eating pork. Stuff like that, man. And Paul just shamelessly called Peter out on it in front of a whole room full of people. And Paul was like the church guy at the time. Or Peter was. And Paul's like, hey, I don't care how popular you think you are, you're doing wrong. And there needs to be spiritual janitors, I guess, cleaning up messes, making sure things stay maintained, stay clean throughout everything that God's wanting to do with everything He's wanting to do. And for me personally, That's what he's building me up for. And I could see it years ago. You know, I saw glimpses of it here and there, just enough to keep that fire of hope alive in me, to keep going, to keep walking forward, even though I had no idea. See the dog's tail. Even though I had no idea where spiritually really I was going. Like, I had an idea. I knew I wanted to end up over here, but I knew all I could do was just take one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, one step after the next, and just trust God. Man, there was so many times I just want to throw in the towel, and God would remind me, it's like, hey, I'm building you up for this time. And now, honestly, with everything that God's been showing me lately, I see how important that time of being built up was, because it's a substance from God that nobody can take away except me. I would have to forfeit it. Nobody else can ruin it. Nobody else can spoil it. Nobody can break it except me, because that was God. That was what God did with me as I gave him opportunity. And especially now that I've given him more opportunities, he has done so much more. But, man, just don't lose heart with where you're at. You ask God for a vision of the ministry he wants for you, you'll get there. You'll get there faster than I did. And I got there faster than Dave and Gary and whoever else, faster than they did, just because they paved that way. Man, they just did. They put their nose to the grindstone and just went. And that has sped up development for me and so many others like me. And now that people like me have done the same, it's speeding up development for people behind me. People that are learning how to get established in God. Man, there is... I know people now that just learned about this message 2, 3, 4 months ago. They have done more with God than people I have gone to church with for 8.5 years. Don't be discouraged. Man, God is not building you up for the time that you see. He is not developing you for the present. He's developing you for this niche ministry that you're going to have, that he is creating for you, that's been set aside for you to bask in, to just, for you and God to just skate through, man. It's like that is living. And that's what God's trying to get each one of us, man, into that, to our own unique niche ministry that he's building us up to. And I'm getting closer and closer to the fruition of mine. What I saw years and years ago, man, you know, it's like looking at the sunset. You know, you just can't reach out and touch it. And now, man, it's just barely out of reach. Like, I can smell it. It's that close. It's just because I refused to lose heart for a very long time. I may have lost motivation here and there, but I didn't completely lose it. Don't let the devil come in behind God's vision of you and tell you that you can't have it because you don't see how it's possible. Looking at these conversations I had with God, you know, even just 3 or 4 years ago, stuff that I was lacking at the time, that I felt almost hopeless about. It's stuff that has now just been cemented in me. You couldn't beat it out of me. And that's what God's working on with all of us. Man, it's about our own unique, individual, personal, heart-to-heart relationship with Jesus, with God, with the Holy Spirit. That's what it's about. That is what's going to keep us in the brighter group, in the faster group. And it gets kind of a little depressing just to know friends I grew up with, went to youth group with, they're not going to be part of this, at least not yet, because they would rather play church. They want to have a heart for God, but they don't want to. Gotta be careful how I say it. They say they have a heart for God, but they don't know how to obey Him because they've put parameters on Him. They put Him in a box. They put boundaries around Him because of what they were taught as a kid. And it's really not exciting to know that, like, the best way I see it, man, is like all of us that just hear God, man, we're going to just, it's like a floating city. Sadie, shut up! See the squirrels out there, it drives her nuts. But it's like God's lifting us up to just be a floating city above what we used to have to be a part of, man, above religion, above ideas, above regulations, laws, things we can't do because of religion, because of God. And, you know, people that would just honor festivals and Sabbaths and new moons and honor regulations and don't taste this, don't touch that, and focus more on things which go away as you use them, instead of something that moth and rust can't destroy. Man, there is nothing more important than a dynamic, personal, constant, habitual relationship with God right now. Otherwise, man, the people who really put their heart in it, who prove it by investing themselves into it, you're just going to be eating their dust. And then you're going to wonder why the same thing hasn't happened to you. And God's going to be like, well, let's evaluate how you spent your time. How's all these new release movies treating you? How's all these new video games treating you? How's all these new bestseller books treating you? You like them because they took the place of where I was supposed to be. I don't want to have that conversation with God. I really don't. And man, the more God shows me, the more I want Him. Because the more I see I need Him. And that's just because I begged for that position. I don't want to do it in my own power. Man, that's why I was talking to this friend of mine at work, and I don't even remember the segue. I think she was looking real tired because a bunch of us work mornings, so we're all pretty close, even though we work different departments. And so she was all baggy-eyed. So I busted in the door of her office, like, "Hey, you hungover?" She's like, "Nah, I just didn't sleep very well. I'll warm up to mornings." And then somehow we got to talking about eating shrooms. And she said something. I was like, "Oh, about how good it feels." And I was like, "Well, yeah, man, but they will turn on you in a dime." And she was like, "Yeah, they will. Man, my brother had shrooms once, and he started tripping out, and he had this weird vision of Jesus and the devil arguing over him, and then he just got all weird and spiritual after that." And it's like, huh, like what kind of spiritual? And then she started explaining about how they were, you know, we were raised in church like the, you know, the super church kind of people. In holiness, we pray in tongues and all that stuff. And then lately, he just started getting more Old Testament. It's like, oh, you sacrificing animals yet? He said, well, no, he's not that far along yet, but, you know, the whole wearing stuff and having to honor these festivals and blah, blah, blah. And then something came up and we had to postpone the conversation. So a little while later, I cornered her again. I was like, hey, so what's your take on the whole Christianity thing? How come you got burned out? And she's like, oh, you know, I'm not really burned out. I just do my own thing. You know, I pull a lot of stuff from Christianity, but you know, the rest of it, I kind of do my thing. I said, well, you still pray in tongues? She's like, no, I'm not really against it. I just don't really do it. I just found my thing and it works for me. See, nobody likes you. That never slows her down. But and just kind of talked for a minute. Then there was this long, awkward pause, and she's like, are you going to invite me to church now? And she started laughing. I was like, no, man, you got to give me a little more credit than that. I just wanted to have a chat with you about it. Peppies. What good is knowing the Bible going to do for a person like that? If we can't give God an avenue to prove himself. Man. She gets in some horrific car wreck and then she has to come to work like with her back in a brace, one of those neck things, and it's just looking half deformed for a while. One prayer for her to tear that crap off. She's better than she was before the car wreck. You think she's going to care about all that other stuff besides Jesus that she's been believing in? That's where we need to go, man. That's not somewhere we're going to get by putting God in a box. So, get that vision of yourself that God sees. And then just trust that God's getting you there. Because he is, even though it does not seem like it. You know, like the Israelites in the desert. It took them 40 years to make a trek that would have taken, what, like 2 weeks or something? Somebody crunched the numbers. I forget what it was, but it was something just so incredibly skewed like that. But okay. God will get you. He will build in you the things that he has shown you of yourself. Hey, wrestle somewhere else. Thank you. Sometimes it doesn't really seem like it. But the things that he's building in you are pertinent to your call. Whether you can see it or not, God can. So, man, just rest in that. Rest in the fact that God does really know what he's doing. I can promise that. I don't know how much that means, but you keep trying, you'll be able to promise it too. So, I think that's about all I got for right now. Just don't be discouraged. Look to what God wants you to be. He'll get you there. So, I guess we'll talk in a few weeks. Enjoy yourself. Love you guys. Bye.